Mr. Binks, you know that you really are testament that you are what you eat. That's because when I rehomed you, you had a few issues, not least with your leg calves Perth's disease, but with over 9 years of feeding you on a raw, balanced and complete diet, you're thriving. And that's why we're jumping on Zoom now to chat to Esther Logue from Paleo Ridge. I'm Anna Webb. Welcome to A Dog's Life. Esther Logue, gosh, thanks so much for coming back onto A Dog's Life.
Oh, thanks so much for having me back, Anna.
Oh, no, I love it. I love our chats because, you know, I'm such a nutrition nerd to have the opportunity to talk about the latest breaking news in nutrition and highlighting how a balanced, complete, raw diet just fuels the immune system. I could talk about it all the time.
I think that's why we end up having quite long conversations, don't we? Because we're on the same page. And nutrition is just such a huge subject, especially when it comes to dogs as well.
Absolutely. You know, and it is because it's such an evolving area. Because I know we were chatting earlier this week and you mentioned, Anna, gosh, you know, it'd be lovely to know, you know, when you did your switch, you know, to raw and notice the differences in your dog. And the funny thing is, you see, I suppose it's because my dad was quite an old dad, as dads went, because he was born in 1920. So, and they all had dogs. And obviously in 1920, there was no prescription diets being invented, obviously. So
Yeah.
dad, obviously, and all the family and relatives and everybody fed their dogs on meat and bits and bobs, really. That was all there was. And they all really thrived on that. So it was that kind of thought process that our family dogs were all fed on. And I used to spend a huge amount of time with my Auntie Pip, who had 6 dogs and was such a dog aficionado. I mean, it's with her I went to Gruff's every year because, oh, it's such a long story. And she introduced me to Tibetan Spaniels. Anyway, and I used to help her feed all her dogs and her 2 cats. You know, I was 8 at this time. And Auntie Pip used to boil up loads of lamb's hearts, and I used to help her chop them up and then feed all her dogs. So for me, it's always been totally normal not to feed processed foods. And that's something I emulate with myself, you know, as well. I'm not a processed food fan for my own human consumption either.
That's so interesting. Yeah, really interesting. And I think you're quite rare in this instance. You know, amazing that you had that. Amazing that you grew up with people who were knowledgeable. And feeding meat as well. You know, feeding hearts. Um, not a lot of people will do that nowadays.
No, I know.
um,
And then
so
it was, yeah, and it was Molly's breeder. I mean, that was just by, you know, luck, really. And then she fed all her bull terriers on a whole variety of different types of meat, but in the main, raw green tripe. And
Amazing.
she actually got tripe, gross as this sounds, from the abattoir, and she would, you know, deal with it. It didn't arrive
Brilliant.
nicely minced,
Yeah.
as your tripe does, which I love. And I'd actually never heard of raw green tripe. You know, I didn't actually at first know exactly what it was. And I never forget ringing my local vet saying, "Oh, hello, I hope you can help me. My puppy's breeder wants me to feed her on raw green tripe. Do you sell it?"
They must have been thinking, what?
I know, I can't really repeat what they said, you know, apart from, "Do you really know what it is?" And I said, "Yes, yes, I've researched it." "Well, you can't feed that to your dog." I said, "Well, why not?" "Because she's a dog," and so on. And I said, all her relatives look really good on it." So, yeah.
Yeah, and that's it. And I think once you see that, firsthand, and you see how, trim and shiny and, sprightly dogs are when they have been fed a raw diet, I mean, you can't really argue with that. Seeing it, in front of you compared to a dog who's fed on processed foods who, maybe doesn't have quite a shiny coat and is a bit more sluggish and, it's just there in front of you and that it's fact.
Yeah,
Proof is in the pudding, really.
it is. It is. It certainly is. And I must say, raw foods, I mean, people talk about them a lot, and some people are quite confused. But the quality of raw brands, I mean, way back in 2002, there weren't any. There was one company, two companies offering raw green tripe only in the whole country. So the market, I feel, has evolved so much as also the science has been piling in on nutrition, not only in a canine world, but in a human world as well.
Yeah, definitely. I think there's a lot more. You're seeing a lot more. Well, I am certainly online about people actually talking about the microbiome now, which, you know, if you go back a few years, this was something that you would mention it and people just didn't know what it was. And I think that's being brought up a lot more now, you know, about gut health and the importance of gut health and how your gut, you know, what you put in affects every other system of the body. And it's really great to see that actually, you know, nutrition is becoming more of a focus now than it has been in previous years.
Absolutely. And that's the whole thing, isn't it? It's about keeping the microbiome fueled with bacteria. I think so many people are afraid of germs.
Yeah,
Yeah, there's
yeah.
all those adverts years ago, you know, kills all known germs. But we actually need bacteria and germs.
Absolutely, yeah. And it's, you know, those adverts you're talking about where I think it's, you know, for all these hand gels, you know, that are everywhere, and especially since COVID as well, you know, there's these antibacterial hand gels and they kill 99% of bacteria, which is wonderful for killing, you know, the nasty bacteria, but they're also getting rid of the healthy bacteria as well. Um, and you are seeing that a lot more, you know, with household products and everything. So whilst it is good to have a clean environment, you know, having it too clean and killing off too much bacteria can actually have a detrimental effect, you know, to yourself and your dog as well.
Yeah, and it's interesting. There's been so many studies about how children who grow up with dogs actually have a much stronger immune system, more disease resilient than children who don't actually grow up with pets.
That's interesting, actually. Really interesting.
Oh no, sometimes I think that's maybe why, touch wood, I seem okay. I remember my dad would go, Anna, don't let the dog lick your face. And I'm going, oh, don't be silly. And oh, dad. Um, and you know, I did.
Well, I think it's important for, you know, especially children to grow up in environments that have bacteria in them, you know, like going outside, playing outside and sitting in dirt. And, you know, the only way that a body's immune system, whether, you know, whether you're a canine or a human, is to be exposed to different types of bacteria, because exposing yourself to bacteria allows your immune system to send in all the, you know, all the helper cells to go in and recognize this bacteria, deal with it, and strengthen the immune system to know how to deal with it if they come into contact with it again. So all the time that you're, you know, shielding um, your child or your dog from bacteria, it could actually be doing them a lot more harm in the long run.
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah. No, it is really, really, really true. It is thinking about the immune system, like you've just said, how it builds and remains robust. It's such a clever thing, isn't it? You know, our
Yeah,
bodies, our bodies are so brilliant at self-healing and dealing with everything to make you resilient against disease, and of course fueling your brain, because the most recent research on, you know, the microbiome and the gut is this extraordinary relationship between your stomach basically and your head.
yeah, it's fascinating, isn't it? And I think, you know, we as humans and canines as well, I think every, you know, animal on this planet, um, their bodies are built in such a way that natural healing is what they are built to do. And if you're giving them the right nutrients and support to do that, then ultimately the chances of, you know, having diseases would be quite slim. And the link between the stomach and the brain is just amazing. You know, the term "you are what you eat." rings very true with that. You know, if you eat a lot of processed foods all the time and you're drinking a lot of fizzy drinks and you're not having much water or nutrition, chances are your mood is going to be quite low and you're going to find it hard to think properly and do tasks in a efficient way. Same with dogs as well. You know, if they're eating processed foods on a daily basis, especially with puppies as well, because trying to train a puppy who's, you know, maybe a bit cognitively impaired makes it very tricky.
It certainly does. No, absolutely it does. I see that very often, to be honest with you. And in many of my consults, I do recommend if dogs, I mean, one of my cases at the moment that I'm particularly chuffed with is this little Boston called Mavis. And I know her owners won't mind me talking about her. And she was on a processed wet food. And I sort of said, look, you know, she's got an issue with her leg. She's got a slipping kneecap as well. She is a rehome. So they got her at about 18 months. And she already had this kneecap problem. Plus, she's very bull breed and very OCD and very strong-willed. So anyway, we've totally got her on the right path, including switching her diet, because I said to them, look, you know, she's 6, roughly halfway through. Let's try and make that be, you know, maybe she's got another 8 years.
Yeah.
And by really changing her gut, I think you'll really see a difference in her kind of slightly moody, hyperactive tantrums. And indeed, in only 2 weeks, they are seeing a big difference in this. Her recovery from her OCD tantrums that have become a habit, because behaviour is a habit, is much quicker. So I saw her actually on Monday this week, and I sort of said, oh, here we go. It's Mad Mavis now. She's gone into Mad Mavis. But we sat it out, no eye contact, folded our arms, looked at the ceiling, and Mad Mavis turned into normal Mavis much quicker than 2 weeks earlier, where I couldn't sit on the floor with her anymore. She was semi-attacking me. So I had to stand up and use height as a bit of a tool.
That's
There
amazing.
you go.
That's
There you
really
go. There you go.
amazing. And, you know, you doing what you do, which is brilliant, you know, doing training and, you know, analyzing behavior as well, to see it firsthand. I mean, for you, you know, I suppose especially since you were, you know, 8 years old, you've actually seen firsthand the amazing benefits of having a healthy diet.
I know. And the thing was, when I was 8 years old, you know, most people did not feed their dogs on processed food.
Yeah, because that was it the 80s when processed
When I
foods?
was 8, no.
Yeah. No. When processed food first started to come about, was it the 80s when it became like really popular?
Yeah, late 70s, I think, to be
Yeah,
honest.
yeah. And I think, well, I mean, since then it's just, you know, it's the well, if you look at the stats in dogs' health from, you know, from like around the 80s to now, and an increase in health conditions since feeding a processed food diet. I mean, it's, you know, it's a no-brainer, really, seeing the link there.
Absolutely. And particularly also with physical conditions, like going back to Mavis for a moment,
Mm,
her slipping kneecap. Because when you think arthritis and joint issues are all caused by inflammation and sometimes calcification also of the joints, by switching diet so that the diet is actually reducing inflammation in the body rather than, in some cases, creating the inflammation, you're going to be helping joint issues as well as gut issues, brain issues, coat issues. It's like such an easy way to promote natural well-being.
definitely. And like you said earlier as well, the quality of the food, you know, makes a huge amount of difference as well, like the quality of the meat, because I know there's, you know, there's so many different companies out there who produce, you know, raw food or cooked food, you know, whatever it is. Um, but it all comes down to the quality of the meat of those animals and how they were raised, whether they're outdoor reared or grass fed, makes a huge difference actually on the well-being of the dog you're feeding it to.
Well, absolutely. That's a whole issue, isn't it? You know,
Yeah,
antibiotics and the fact that meat has cortisol in it, you know, because uh, the transportation, I mean, I find this part of it all a bit sort of squeamish, I suppose. I don't like to think of when I'm feeding the dogs, for example, some Paleo Ridge turkey. I don't like to think of turkeys.
no.
But that's just because I'm a massive animal lover, and it's because I'm an animal lover that I want to feed my dogs on what's going to make them be the most healthy. And some Paleo Ridge turkey, for example, is a fantastic option that you offer.
Definitely. And, I speak to many people on a weekly basis who, phone up wanting to switch to raw, and they're actually vegans themselves. And they, don't like the idea of having to deal with raw meat, but they know it's the best diet for their dog. So because of that, they do it, which I think is amazing, especially if they've got quite strong morals, about animals themselves. Um, Even that just goes to show that it is the best diet for dogs. If vegans can feed their dogs meat, then that says a lot too.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But you're right about the sourcing, because of course there are so many brilliant British farmers that are actually enriching the planet rather than, as many vegans think, destroying the planet. And we need the
Yeah.
biodiversity, and we need ethical farmers. Of course, industrialized farming, like industrialized pretty much anything, is not good. But so many are not doing that now.
Yeah, it's becoming more common, and I think the people are becoming more wise to the fact that the raw food industry is growing substantially, and I think other people want to get on board with that, which is great. Spread the word about raw, but we have to remember that whilst feeding a raw diet, that you've got to have good traceability of your meat, and I think any reputable company will have good traceability of where their meat comes from, and how it's produced. And I think if anybody who is looking to switch to raw, obviously look for a company that does have that traceability, because if you can't see where that meat has come from, chances are it's probably not going to be of very good quality. Um, that's something that we believe in quite a lot, and we go and visit all of our farms and abattoirs, and everywhere we source our meat from, and we do that on a regular basis to make sure they're keeping in line with the regulations. And I think that that's really important for feeding a healthy natural diet.
Yes, and there are so many brands popping up. You're absolutely right. Like to jump on this new trend, which frankly
Yeah.
isn't new. It's not new. It's been happening for thousands of years, dogs eating meat. But it's what concerns me slightly is some of the white label brands. What do you make of that?
Yeah, so I think white labeling is becoming more popular. I don't know personally a huge amount about the white labeling industry. However, um, I think if anybody, I think if you are white labeling, again, I think there is a sort of legislation in place to have traceability on where that product is coming from. So I think anybody who, if you go into a pet store and you see a raw food brand, I think you can absolutely contact them to find out where they are sourcing their meat from. And they should, if they are a high quality brand, then they should have that traceability as well.
Yes, yes, absolutely. I mean, it's all about having a conscience at the end of the day, and our pets are so important to us that keeping their health and promoting their longevity isn't as difficult as sometimes people think.
Yeah, I think sometimes, with a lot of things in life, things are overcomplicated, and especially with having, various conflicting information, especially online. I mean, the internet is amazing, but it also is a pain sometimes because there is just so much misinformation on there. Um, so yeah, I think, doing proper research, I would recommend to anybody, before before switching to raw. And also just so it's worth phoning and speaking to companies, raw dog food manufacturers. We always welcome people calling us and asking us questions about where our products come from, and the quality of them, and basically any questions about feeding raw. And a lot of the time when you speak to people at the end of the call, they feel a lot better and are like, that's actually a lot more simple than I thought it was.
I agree. People think you're going to end up with something like a whole pig's leg or something delivered.
Yeah.
And recently, my cat Gremlin was poorly, and I had to explain what Gremlin ate. And he obviously was fed on raw, lots of lamb's hearts and lots of other things, and it was just really weird.
Yeah.
Because the vet just staring at me, didn't understand it at all. Are you sure this is the best nutrition for your cat? I couldn't really believe it, because he was very aware that cats are obligate carnivores, which simply basically means they eat meat. So it's just
Yeah.
kind of this massive gap, isn't it?
I think it is. And I think there's definitely like a lack of education, which is through nobody's fault. But there is a lack of education around pet food because, we know that cats and dogs, they eat meat. So why not give them fresh, wholesome meat? And I think it's, and I totally understand where you're coming from because people do give you a strange look sometimes. You're like, what? Raw meat? Like actual, like liver and hearts. And it's like, yeah, that's, that is actually probably one of the best things that you can give a cat or a dog, um, natural nutrients. And, way back in the day, before the Western world became how it is today, offal was, often recommended to eat, multiple times a week just because of its nutritional content. And people did used to eat offal a lot more. I think now it's kind of like people are quite disgusted by it. But nutritionists that I've spoken to have said that, we should all be including offal in our diet, even as humans.
So interesting. You see, and you look at France, though, I think it's also quite regional. I lived in Paris for 2 years. So I always have to
Oh,
drop
wow,
that
did
in.
you?
Yeah, I did actually. Yeah, I worked for my first firm I ever worked for, organising exhibitions, and they had a Paris office, and I could speak French. It was also casual in those
Wow.
days. And they said, "Look, Anna, right, we're launching a show over there. It's going to be a multilingual show, bringing an American event to Europe, and would have worked a lot better once the euro had been invented, because it was quite a long time ago, this. So anyway, yes, oh gosh, I love Paris. I had this amazing flat on the island where Notre Dame is. I mean, I was right in the most amazing part of Paris. Oh
That
yeah,
sounds
so
incredible.
a part of my heart was always there. But interestingly, though, you'd go, pigs trotters would be on the menu in a really shishi restaurant in Paris. Beef brains, servo, I mean, a delicacy. I never ate them. All sorts of things, like really no waste going on in France. And obviously, it's supposed to be the culinary capital of the world. And, you're eating things like that, tripe. But I mean, tripe on the menu everywhere. White tripe, obviously, washed tripe, but
Yeah.
tripe is a real delicacy in France. So I think it's quite regional.
Yeah, well, it sounds like it. I mean, I think in England we're very much like, I think we've lost our way with food, to be honest. And it seems processed foods are just quite high up on the list, for a lot of people, and it's quite sad, really. But I mean, me saying this, by the way, I have not eaten offal in my life, and the thought of it, yeah, the thought of it does make me feel a bit, oh, I'm not sure. But since learning about nutrition and learning about the benefits of these sorts of things, I am actually very open to try it now. Not raw, obviously, but yeah, and I think the general public now, I think, is becoming more aware of, nutrition, which is only a good thing. And I know we've got a long way to go, with dogs, but I think we're definitely on the right path into, um, putting raw food at the top of the list when you're buying food for your dog.
Absolutely. I mean, for me, I can't really be faffed too much with too much cooking. I've got better other things to do, like walk the
Yeah.
dogs or whatever it might be. Rather than thinking, oh, let's get the cookery book out and get all these ingredients and, all the rest of it. So for me, it's just the simplicity of feeding raw, to be quite honest, as well. And being absolutely totally convinced that feeding dogs sterile food, which let's just put it bluntly, all processed food is sterile. That just doesn't really sit well with me at all. Never has done, you see. So that's why I love feeding raw, and I always have done since I've owned dogs on my own as a grown up now. Gosh, Esther, for over 22 years.
Wow,
Crumbs.
that's amazing.
I know, don't. But yeah, and it's just the simplicity of doing it. And I think people are afraid of germs spreading in the fridge. And I always say to people, look, you've got to be sensible. Full
Yeah,
stop. You know, you
yeah.
are handling raw meat. So just like with your chicken that you might have for your Sunday roast, you wash your hands after you've touched that chicken. Keep the chicken sealed, and you don't keep the chicken next to your cheese or whatever in the fridge. And would you agree on that?
Yeah, absolutely. This is probably one of the most common things we get asked about, about contamination and how dangerous it could be to feed raw. And in fact, what you said is spot on. If you're the way you would prepare or handle raw meat when you're cooking food for your family is exactly the same way you would do it here. We always say to keep, the packs in a sealed Tupperware in the bottom of the fridge. So if it's sealed, there's no way, you're going to have any cross contamination there. And just washing utensils after you've used them. I mean, it really is that simple to do. And I know that it tends to be overcomplicated, but yeah, if you can prepare, raw meat for cooking for your family, it's exactly the same for your dog.
Exactly, exactly. Now, paleo's really expanded in the last year or so. I've seen it, and you've got such a great range of treats now. Well, I must say, we love, so we really recommend 110%.
Yeah, the treats range is doing really well, and the treats that we offer, I mean, in line with our raw food as well. Um, it's all natural, all ethically sourced, and all naturally air dried as well, just to make sure all of those nutrients are locked in. So the good thing about the treats is there's no additives or anything in them, and they're actually healthy. So you can feed them, as treats, or you can feed them as a topper for your meals as well, which is quite handy. And you know that giving those, you're not, putting anything bad into your dog's system, which we love.
We do love that. I have to say, we love them all the treats, but I think possibly our favourite is the lamb lung. I love
Oh.
the lamb lung. It's just such a great dog trading treat. Just explain the lamb lung a little bit.
Yeah, so the lamb lung, so again, these are naturally air dried, and lung is so nutritious, especially from lamb as well. There's just an abundance of vitamins and minerals in there. Um, and the good thing about the lung as well is compared to the other treats, which when they're dried, they can become like quite hard. Whereas the lamb lung, they're quite soft, so you can, I don't know how to describe the texture really, but they're quite light, so you can break them in half quite easily. And yeah, in all honesty, I think they are our most popular treat at the moment.
Wow, yeah, I can believe that. And they're just so, as mentioned, for dog training, so you can have them in your pocket. They're not sticky, so they don't stain your trouser pocket or whatever,
Yeah.
which is really useful. So you've got quick access to a treat. That's the whole point with dog training. And also they don't crumble, because although they're soft, I agree, the consistency is quite hard to describe. They're very easy with kitchen scissors uh, to
That's good to know.
well, to cut, obviously, I spend hours doing these things into shavings. Very, very nice, like you might have Parmesan shavings on a Caesar salad. So you can create that look, if you like, on your dog's dinner, or indeed on even on your cat's dinner, because lamb lung is totally species appropriate also for a cat. And I do know actually that cats do like lamb lung. I know Paleo doesn't sell them to be a cat treat exactly, but I don't think there's any harm in feeding the lamb lung to a cat. Do you, Esther?
No, not at all. I mean, lamb lung is great for cats, whether it's raw or dried. And to be honest, when you told me about grating the lamb lung on top of your cat's food, I did the same for mine, and she loved it. She really loved it.
Well, that's great, isn't it? Isn't that exciting?
Yeah, yeah, it definitely is, because I know a lot of people have dogs and cats together. So, for anybody listening that does use our treats, give that a try. Just grate a little bit of the lamb lung on top of your cat's dinner and see what they think. And let us know as well if they like it.
Yeah, no, definitely, definitely. And similarly, your broth is multi-species, isn't it? And that's also new. And it's been such a godsend. Certainly, we're recording actually in the middle of this strange Indian heatwave summer that we're
Yeah,
having. And broth is just, I just love it 'cause it's such peace of mind because, well, feeding raw and natural for me is just that peace of mind. And isn't that a lovely thing to be able to have in life? At least on one aspect.
yeah,
But
definitely.
yeah, and the broth, it's peace of mind that you really are hydrating your dog when it's hot, because dogs, they suffer in the heat, and it's all about, bit by bit, if your dog gets too hot on Tuesday, gets too hot on Wednesday and Thursday as well, that's when potentially you're creating slight organ damage, basically. So to know that you're doing everything in your capacity to stop that is peace of mind.
Definitely. And this whole thing about prevention as well, preventing things before they get bad. And bone broth is, especially during the summer, has just been a godsend really, because you can freeze it, you can give it as a frozen treat, you can give it as a cool drink, you can even warm it in the winter and have it over, pour it over the food. And each way it is just so packed full of nutrients. It just does absolute wonders. And again, you can give it to your cat as well if you have cats. It's not just suitable for dogs. And I actually, when we first launched our bone broth range, I tried my cat on it. She's very fussy, as cats usually are, and she couldn't get enough of it. She absolutely loves it.
That's such good news. I know gremlin, I used to call it brothers. So, prior, I'd always make my own broth, but now, of course, that's another burgeoning sector of the market. So, years ago, broth, well, you certainly couldn't buy it anywhere really, but now on a human level, you can buy broth. I've got this super posh butcher that's opened quite recently. They sell a whole range of different broth for humans, which I wouldn't recommend people use for their dogs, because often it's got things like onion and garlic in, which are potentially toxic in the right quantity to dogs. So always get a broth that's been designed specifically for a dog, right, Esther?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, but so gremlin, yeah, brothers, that was our cue word for it. I'd go, Graham, it's time for brothers, and he'd come running, for his brothers. So I'm mad. I have funny words for things that work as a training cue, you see. So it'll always be brothers in this house.
Yeah, I love that.
I know, it's funny. So yeah, no, he was a massive fan, but you've got lamb broth, which I love, because lamb isn't as farmed in inverted commas as beef or chicken.
Yeah, exactly right. And I think anything lamb based, whether it's lamb tripe or lamb broth, lamb lung, we usually recommend lamb to a lot of people just because it is such a great meat. And as you said, it's not as intensely farmed as other animals.
Exactly. And that's important, as is variety. So to swap different broths with different meats that you might have selected. If you're going for a bit of paleo pork, then maybe choose the chicken broth as to complement that with a bird.
Definitely, yeah. And I think variety is key. With feeding raw as well, because you'll get different levels of nutrients from different animals. And also, feeding your dog the same thing time and time again is really boring for them, just to have the same meat. And not only that, they're not going to be getting everything that they need from it. So to mix things up is actually really great for them, and I'm sure they would agree that they love having all the different flavors.
Yes. Well, it's also just mimicking how they would exist if they were a street dog or back in the day when they were wild, because one day they might eat a whole rabbit, the next day they might have a chicken
Yeah.
or a bird, or find something, or whatever it might be, a tasty rat. I mean, yes, perish the thought, but let's be realistic about that. I've got so many foxes around here at the moment, and the other night I was just working here laptop and I can just see the garden through the window. And I was like, oh no, here we go. And there was a fox in my garden with a rat, throwing it
Wow.
around just like a cat would, throwing it in the air, jumping on it, throwing it up and down. I thought, gosh, please eat it. I thought,
Yeah.
please don't leave that rat dead for me to tread in it first thing in the morning or something. It happened. It's nature. That's the thing. I think we have to get realistic about this. Dogs
Yeah.
are animal. You know what I mean?
Yeah, of course. And it's like, I mean, it's lovely nowadays that, for our domestic dogs that we've got these complete meals that has everything minced up and put in for you. So all you have to do is defrost it and put it in the bowl. It's amazing that we have this available now. Whereas, you know, 20, 30 years ago or so, it would all be DIY, wouldn't it? So you would be having to deal with, the full prey or, legs or actual whole hearts or anything, which a lot of people wouldn't want to deal with nowadays. So the fact that we've got these complete meals all minced up is amazing, and it makes people want to, feed raw.
Well, it does, especially when I honestly believe, you see the benefits in your dog so quickly, from brighter eyes to, of course, cleaner teeth. Teeth, that's a whole nother podcast perhaps to talk about, and
Yeah.
how raw really helps keep your dog's oral health in good nick naturally, again, because of not being sterile and, not sticking into their teeth and creating dental disease.
Yeah, I mean, that's a whole topic in
It
itself,
is a whole
like you
topic.
said. Yeah, but it's, that is one of the biggest benefits to shout about with raw is uh, oral health, which is massive as well because, um, a dog's mouth is the beginning of the digestive system. So, that again has a knock-on effect to everything else. So if you've got bad gum health, then that's going to affect your digestive system, and then it's going to have a knock-on effect, and so on and so on. But I won't
Yeah.
dive too deep into that right now.
Well, no, but the other thing about this, right? Because I was actually talking on the Jeremy Vine show about this, name drop. What am I like? And you see, dentals aren't covered in the main by insurance. So when your dog has a hygienist appointment, you can't claim it on insurance. So you have to totally pay for it yourself, obviously. The minimum amount for a dental hygienist appointment is around about 500. And some
Wow.
vet, you have to be aware of all this. I mean, I'm lucky, I suppose, in my experience, but it can be a whole lot more if your vet hasn't sort of made it clear that sometimes they charge by the tooth. So you may be putting your dog under, an anesthetic and all the rest of it for 2 teeth to be removed. And then you go and pick your dog up and find that 5 teeth have been removed. So your bill could then suddenly be double, almost double than what you thought it was going to be. So there's that aspect too, to think of, nitty gritty financial reasons to feed raw.
It's quite scary, actually. I did actually hear you. I listened to you on the Jeremy Vine show yesterday. You did very well, by the
Oh,
way.
oh,
um,
cheers.
and about vets bills, and I think that's one of the biggest things, with why we try to shout about raw diet, because vets bills are crazy, crazy high, and it does put people off wanting to adopt dogs. I think that's probably the biggest thing that prevents people from rescuing dogs is, the implications of the vet bills that could come. So, in our eyes, what we want to do is try and promote a natural raw diet that will prevent people from having to take their dogs to the vets, as much as possible. And if you're strengthening the immune system and you're not putting processed rubbish into their systems, chances are they're going to be quite healthy, and your vet visits are going to be very limited, which is also another plus for feeding a good quality diet.
Yes, and that's why, I feel oftentimes, not all vets, there's more vets that are embracing feeding raw. Some vets even sell raw in their practices, actually, but there's still many vets that just think you're utterly weird. And you,
Yeah.
you do get a lot of resistance to it. And I mean, for me, I just see that as being a bit afraid of raw, as limiting their profits.
Yeah. Yeah,
which is really what was being aired on Jeremy Vine. I mean, we're at a point now where government is looking into vet bills in this country as being 3 times more than what they are in France. And some people going to France have procedures done, because the whole thing, even with the traveling to France and everything, will be considerably cheaper than just popping up to your local practice, which I feel is just really sad. I just feel it's so sad. I just think
yeah,
it's so sad. That's all I can think it is. I grew up watching All Creatures Great and Small, based on, James Herriot and all of that. And gosh, I mean, it's nothing like that anymore. And that's all
yeah.
happened again in such a short period of time.
I think it's such a shame as well because, if people are having to travel abroad to get cheaper, care for their pets, the scary thing is that the people who actually just can't afford it, what's actually happening to their animals? Because if they can't afford the care, there's not many options for them, and that is, quite heartbreaking.
But you see, feeding the good diet, I did mention this, I think, didn't I,
Yeah,
yesterday?
yeah.
You
Thank
know,
you.
well, obviously you didn't mention any brands.
No, of
Um,
course.
but yeah, no, absolutely. It's a simple, cost-effective way of literally, I promise every listener here, to keep your dog away from the vet.
And feeding again, feeding a wholesome diet, feeding a variety. If you can, limit the amount of toxins in the environment as well, with harsh floor cleaners, and antibacterial gels and things around your dog. If you're doing that, then your dog is going to have such an amazing chance at not having to go to the vets, which is ultimately what we want. We want to prevent that as much as we can. So, do some research and, contact us if you want to talk, or, contact Anna, because ultimately what our goal is in this industry is to prevent dogs from getting diseases and having to seek medical care.
Absolutely. Oh, please come back, and can we do a whole episode on environmental stressors?
Yes, definitely. I think that's a big topic actually at the moment.
Well, it is. I
um,
mean, I remember I've done an okay blog for you, but that just covered kind of a brief overview, really. There's so many more.
That's a brilliant blog, by the way, for anybody listening. If you go to the Paleo Ridge website, and you'll see Anna's blog on our news section about environmental stresses, and it's a very informative blog, really great.
Oh, thank you. I think it just gives people a flavor
Yeah,
of, yeah. But obviously, there's so much more that we can discuss on that, definitely. I mean, vaccines, for example, I might as well just say it, they are an environmental stressor too. Over medication is an environmental stressor. And so, of course, if your dog is fed on raw and doesn't have a load of inflammation in their body, then the chances of them needing medication is reduced, you see. So, and I just think, what I didn't say on Jeremy Vine yesterday, because I got, I did the piece, I think it was just right, was looking abroad. Let's look for inspiration in other countries and how other countries' vets operate. And many of them are extremely different to ours. Like, in Norway, you don't spay or neuter because it's illegal. Now,
oh, I didn't know that.
oh, really? Gosh, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
wow.
Yeah, in Scandinavia, in Sweden, it's not illegal, but it's really frowned upon. And in Norway, it is illegal. Obviously, if your dog has an issue, like one testicle hasn't come down or something, then okay, neutering is allowed, because that can be a dangerous health issue for a male dog. But no, absolutely not, because the science, you see, is out there, that it's all to do with the LH hormone that accumulates, you see, in the body and doesn't have anywhere to go. And so it's neutering and spaying distorts the balance, the homeostasis of the body, because it's a totally unnatural thing to do. And sadly, the science is out there that neutered animals do get cancer more than unneutered.
That's really interesting because I mean, when I adopted my cat when she was younger, she's 11 now, so I've had her, just over 10 years. And at that time, I didn't really. She was my first you know, my first proper pet. And I didn't really know much about it, but you know, you're given this advice, like you must have them spayed at this age and you must do this, that, and the other. And now knowing the things that I know now, it's actually quite, you kind of feel a bit bad, don't you? Um, about going through these processes and not really knowing much about it.
Absolutely. And the pressure is still on with vets. Lots of people ring me up, and one in particular, lovely Italian greyhound client, said, Anna, what is this? I don't want to get be neutered. She's 12 weeks. I'm so not going to think about this now, all the rest of it. And I said, well, quite right. Remember, she's your dog. But I'm getting text messages from the vet practice going, we need to book her in for a 6-month spay. Yeah, and actually, no, she doesn't need to be spayed. It's not a given that your dog will get pregnant if you don't have them neutered. Prue's not neutered. I mean, she'll never have puppies, of course, you know. Binks is, sadly, but he was, neutered before I got him. Otherwise, I don't think I would neuter him. Cats are different, actually. You know, an unneutered cat becomes a tomcat if they're a boy. They're more prone, obviously, to getting accidents, being run over, getting into punch-ups, and all of these things. So it's a bit trickier with a cat, particularly one that's outdoors. And I think Tom, you know, a male cat that's,
Yeah.
yeah. So it's a bit different with cats.
Yeah.
And female cats come into season all the time and so on. So yeah, it's a different issue with cats, but certainly with dogs, there's no reason that anything wrong could happen. And behaviorally, of course, it's a massive misnomer that chopping off a dog's balls will make them less aggressive. That also has been scientifically proven to not be the case as well. So
I think that that's actually, yeah, that's probably one of the biggest myths, I would say, that you hear all the time, and that is, you know, the only solution for sorting out their behavior, which is mind blowing.
well, it seems it's an easy solution. So people think, oh, great, I'll just get that done and then everything will be fine. And then
Yeah.
they realize that actually, crumbs, it's got worse because the science concurs that it can make it all worse. But we're so now everything should be one click. And so it's the hard work in dog training every day that I think a lot of owners perhaps underestimated, that it is hard work and
Yeah.
it's a commitment to own a dog. It's not just for Instagram.
Definitely. And I think that needs to be highlighted a lot more. And I think we spoke about, I can't remember if it was the last podcast I did with you, and we were talking about, you know, perhaps we need to bring back like a license, or, you know, taking some sort of exam or something before you before you get a dog, so you know what you're letting yourself in for, and you know what your responsibility is as the dog owner, you know, for the rest of their life.
Yes, yes. I think it is going to come in, actually. There's a number of organizations talking about launching such an exam, but it's regulating it and deciding, you know, the levels of passing it or not and all the rest of it. That does, I think that will take a bit of time. And I just, again, can't believe that we're in a position where something like this is having to be discussed. You know, we've been living with dogs for over 30,000 years,
Yeah.
um, really well. And it's just this modern world, I think, and feeling that you want to be in a club and have a dog and that makes you belong to the dog world. But it's more difficult because your dog might pull on the lead and bark at everybody. And then that world you wanted to be a part of, you're ostracized from or feel embarrassed. A lot of people feel embarrassed when their dog barks and creates and does things they don't want the dog to do, walking along the pavement. So I say to people, don't. But, you know, one person said recently, but it's so embarrassing, Anna. And I'm like, well, look, just don't think of it like that. We've got to work through his problems. There isn't any other way to do it. And this
Yeah.
particular little dog is doing really, really well, actually. Yeah, I'm quite proud. Yeah. So
Oh, that's
I like
so good
taking
to
on,
hear.
yeah, I like taking on older dogs, actually, with really dedicated owners that want to see the benefits, because it's so rewarding. And you're spending time with your dog. It's just such a great thing to do. That's because I do it all the time, but I just find it so relaxing. You're in the moment. You when you've got a difficult dog, you really can't think about anything else than you and that dog when you're out and about and you see progress. And this it's so satisfying. That's the thing, and it's an aspect of life that you really can't get from anywhere else apart from being with your dog.
Yeah, which I think is an amazing experience. Having this connection and this bond and working with, this totally different species,
Yeah.
and building such a lovely connection, which, dogs and humans have such an amazing bond. And when you see that work well, there's just nothing like it.
Exactly. Well, Esther, look, we could chat and chat and chat, but so yes, let's reconvene and perhaps delve into some of these other aspects and why Raw can help you train your dog.
Yes, definitely. Would love to come back and talk more with you.
Thank you, Esther, so much.
Oh, no problem. Thanks for having me.
That's our show, Mr. Binks. What did you think? Yes, it is so interesting talking about nutrition. And as you know, I could talk about it all day. And you're right, it is time for Woof of the Week. Never underestimate that you are what you eat. Well, I hope you all enjoyed it. If you did, please rate and review the show wherever you tune into your podcasts, because it really does make a difference. Thanks again to Esther Logue for joining us today, and all the links, of course, are in the show notes. Thanks again to Mike Hanson, my very patient producer, and you find out more about him at Pod People UK. What's that, Mr. Binks? Yes, you're right. We will be back in your feed next Sunday. So go on, subscribe. It's free. And that way you'll never miss another show. Bye for now.
Pod People.